The morning was ordinary, too ordinary. The sunlight gently filtered through the white curtains in the kitchen, enveloping everything around in a warm, yet slightly colorless light. Adam Carter stood at the kitchen counter, leaning on it with one hand, holding a cup of hot coffee in the other. It seemed as if everything around was screaming about peace. The quiet house, the steady ticking of the old wall clock, the faint sound of birds chirping outside. Adam loved this tranquility. It had become not just a comfort for him, but a shield that protected him from the chaos of the past. He slowly stirred the sugar in the cup, watching as the spoon created whirls in the black liquid. The stains on the wooden countertop nearby reminded him that it was time to clean, but he couldn't bring himself to break away from this routine, because the ritual was all he had left. The phone rang, shattering the silence. Adam jumped, his hand reflexively jerked, and a drop of coffee fell on his t-shirt. The phone rang again. The dull, vibrating hum of the old phone spread across the table. He looked at it with a mix of irritation and reluctant curiosity. A work call? Or maybe some mailing list he should have unsubscribed from long ago? But when his gaze fell on the screen, his heart skipped a beat. Rachel, a name he hadn't seen in 5 long years. His fingers tightened on the cup, and then he abruptly set it down on the counter, almost knocking it over. Silence reigned again, but now it was a different silence, oppressive, filled with pressure and the hum of thoughts in his head. Why was she calling? What did she need? It couldn't be for nothing. "Don't answer," whispered an inner voice, cold and confident. But it was already too late. Adam's fingers reached for the phone on their own, and before he could think about what he was doing, he had already slid his finger across the screen. "Hello!" His voice sounded unexpectedly calm, almost indifferent, but his heart was pounding like a drum. There was a pause on the other end of the line, one that was too long to be accidental. Then he heard her voice. "Adam!" It was a name spoken softly, almost uncertainly, as if she was afraid he would hang up. He couldn't help but notice how Rachel's voice remained the same as he remembered it. Sweet, but with a strange note that he had always found dangerous. You can't be sure about this voice, he thought back then, and now that thought returned with renewed force. "What do you need, Rachel?" His tone was abrupt, cold. He wanted her to feel that this call was a mistake. For a moment she hesitated, as if choosing her words. "I need to talk to you. It's important." Her words were soft but full of heaviness that sent a chill down Adam's spine. His face hardened. What could be so important that she decided to break 5 years of silence? He swallowed the first wave of anger rising in his chest and replied, "You lost the right to tell me what's important, Rachel. So tell me what you need, and let's get this over with. This is not something I can explain over the phone." Her voice became a little more tense. "Please, Adam, it's about us, about what happened." What happened? Those words stuck in his head. What did she mean? It seemed like that whole nightmare had already been dissected, reevaluated, and buried. Could she have found a new way to destroy him? "We could meet," she added before he could say anything. "It will only take a few minutes." Adam wanted to say no right away. His logic screamed that this was a bad idea, that nothing good would come of it. But inside him, a foolish, weak feeling of curiosity was growing, against which he could do nothing. He closed his eyes, clenching his teeth. "Fine, just once, but I choose the place." "Thank you," she whispered, and there was genuine relief in her voice. This only angered him more. When the conversation ended, Adam put the phone down on the table and slumped into a chair. His hands were shaking, and he felt the pressure building in his chest. Whatever she wanted, he knew one thing. This conversation would change everything. The sense of peace he had been building for years began to crack at the seams. The cafe was located on a quiet street in the city center. Adam chose this place specifically. It was busy enough to feel safe, but not so lively as to attract unwanted attention. He arrived half an hour early, wanting to make sure everything was under control, or maybe he just needed time to gather his thoughts. Sitting at a table by the window, Adam took a deep breath, trying to calm the trembling in his hands. He ordered a black coffee and aimlessly looked out the window at the people, feeling the excitement growing with each second. His mind was filled with memories he had tried to bury. The days when he and Rachel laughed together, argued about movies, and made plans for the future. And the day when it all collapsed. She betrayed his trust, taking away the part of his life he considered the strongest. Now that past suddenly burst into his present like a knife cutting through healed skin. When the cafe door opened, Adam felt his breath catch. He turned his head and saw her. Rachel. She looked different. Her hair was a little shorter, and there were wrinkles at the corners of her eyes that he didn't remember. But her walk remained the same, confident, as if the whole world revolved around her. It was annoying. Her appearance seemed too calm, too out of place after everything she had done. She noticed him and, after a moment's hesitation, walked towards his table. When she approached, Adam didn't stand up. He didn't even bother to offer her a seat. Instead, he just nodded to the chair opposite. "Hi, Adam," she said, sitting down. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. But he already knew that tone. She could be soft when it suited her. "Rachel," his voice was cold, detached. He took a sip of coffee without taking his eyes off her. "You wanted to talk. So talk." Her hands clenched on the table, and her eyes wandered, avoiding his gaze. She was nervous. It was a rare moment, and Adam couldn't help but enjoy it. "I know I'm showing up unexpectedly," she began, finally meeting his gaze. Her eyes were shiny, but not from tears, but from suppressed tension. "But this is important. I had to tell you this a long time ago, but I was afraid." Adam smirked. His laughter was cold and short, like a whip. "You were afraid? Interesting. Of what? You were never afraid to ruin my life." Her face twitched, but she held back. "It's about my son," she said, her voice trembling. For a moment, the words hung in the air like thunder about to strike. Adam looked at her, his eyes narrowed. "Your son," he repeated slowly, as if savoring the words. "And how is this related to me?" Her gaze darkened. Now her voice sounded more tense, almost pleading. "Liam is sick, Adam. He has leukemia. The doctors say he needs a bone marrow transplant. I thought—" She hesitated, as if afraid to say the last words. "I thought you might be willing to get tested. You might be a suitable donor." Those words hit Adam like a train. He silently looked at her, unable to believe what she had just said. His hands clenched into fists, and his heart was beating so loudly that he could barely hear her next words. "I know I have no right to ask," she said quickly, noticing his expression. "But he is innocent, Adam. He's just a child." Adam leaned back in his chair, his gaze icy. He tried to digest her words, but they wouldn't fit in his head. "Are you saying that after everything you've done, you're coming to me now because I'm your last hope?" His voice sounded quiet, but there was more threat in that calmness than in a scream. Rachel didn't look away. She clenched her hands, her nails digging into her palms, but she didn't flinch. "I'm not coming for myself," she said, her voice trembling, but sincere. "Liam is all I have. He is innocent." The words stuck in Adam's throat. For several long seconds, he just looked at her, and then he abruptly stood up. "I'll think about it," he threw out, pulling money out of his pocket and tossing it on the table. "But don't think I'm doing this for you." He turned and walked towards the exit, feeling his anger and confusion overwhelming him. He needed air. He needed to get away from her, to gather his thoughts. When he left the cafe, the cold wind hit his face, but he didn't even notice. All he felt was the weight of her words hanging over him like a storm. What should he do? Get drawn back into her world, or leave it all behind? The day began in strange silence. Adam sat at the kitchen table, not touching his morning coffee, which had long gone cold before he picked up the cup. His gaze was fixed on the phone lying on the table. Rachel had sent the clinic's number the night before, adding a short message. "Please think about it for Liam." The words swirled in his head, fueling something painful. He tried to focus, but the internal dialogue wouldn't stop. For Liam. He didn't know this boy. He had never met him, never heard his voice. But now the fate of the child had somehow ended up in his hands. Adam ran his fingers through his hair and sighed heavily. Taking the phone, he dialed the clinic's number. After a few rings, a friendly female voice answered. "Whitehaven Clinic, how can I help you?" Adam cleared his throat, trying to find an even tone. "Hello. I would like to schedule a compatibility test for a bone marrow donation. I was given your number. Of course, what is your name? Adam Carter, he said, feeling the tremor in his voice. Great, Mr. Carter. We can schedule you for tomorrow morning at 10:30. Will that work? He nodded, realizing a moment later that she couldn't see him. Yes, that will work. Ending the conversation, he leaned back in his chair. The decision had been made, but with it came a new wave of doubts. The next day, Adam arrived at the clinic a little earlier. The clean white walls, the sterile smell of disinfectants, and the soft music created an atmosphere that was both soothing and irritating. The reception greeted him with a smile that seemed too bright for such a place. Mr. Carter, the nurse asked, looking at the list. Yes, he replied briefly. Please fill out this form and wait until you are called. He sat in a corner of the waiting room, filling out the questionnaire, trying not to pay attention to the people around him. Each word on the paper, from emergency contact person to medical history, seemed like a sharp reminder of what he had stepped into the unknown. When his name was finally called, he stood up and walked into a small office. A young nurse in a white coat greeted him with a friendly smile. Thank you for coming, Mr. Carter. This is an important step. We will take a blood sample from you. It will only take a few minutes. Okay, he replied, sitting in the chair. She quickly prepared the instruments, and a few minutes later, the procedure was completed. Adam felt the tension beginning to ease, but only a little. We will contact you within a few days as soon as we have the results, the nurse said, handing him a card with the clinic's number. He nodded, getting up from the chair. Thank you. You are doing something truly important, she added with a soft smile. But Adam only briefly thanked her and left. Those words did not bring him relief. At home, he spent the rest of the day in thought. He wanted to distract himself, but every attempt to finish work or watch a movie ended with a return to thoughts about Liam, a boy who had never asked to be part of this chaos. Late in the evening, the phone vibrated. It was a message from Rachel. Thank you for getting tested. It means a lot to us. Liam knows you're trying to help him. He wants to see you if you agree. Adam put the phone down on the table without responding. Her request seemed too close to the personal boundaries he had tried so hard to build. A few days later, the clinic called. Adam was sitting in his car when he answered the call. Mr. Carter, this is the White Haven Clinic. We have your results. Are you ready to discuss them? His breathing became a little deeper, his heart pounding. Yes, I'm listening. You are compatible. This is good news. Now we can plan the next steps. Would you like to know more about the procedure? Adam was silent for a few seconds. He knew that saying no would be easier, but then he remembered Rachel's voice, filled with desperation, and imagined Liam, a child who just wanted to live. Yes, he finally replied. Tell me. The conversation lasted no more than 5 minutes, but afterward, Adam felt as if he had spent an hour in a struggle with himself. He sat in the car, looking at the steering wheel, until the phone rang again. It was Rachel again. Hi, Adam. Her voice was timid. I just wanted to know if they called you. They called, he replied briefly. She hesitated as if afraid of his tone. And? What did you decide? He took a deep breath, feeling his heart tighten. I'll go through with it. But this doesn't change anything between us, Rachel. I'm not doing this for you. On the other end, he heard her soft intake of breath in relief. Thank you, Adam, she said, her voice sincere, but he immediately interrupted her. I said I'm not doing this for you, and not to bring anything back. This is for the boy. He hung up the phone before she could say anything. Left in silence, Adam felt his anger and resentment beginning to shift in the face of a new feeling: responsibility. The decision had been made, but ahead lay something more than he could imagine. The day of the transplant arrived faster than Adam expected. The morning began with the dull ringing of the alarm clock, which he turned off before it even had a chance to sound. The night had been long. Fragmented thoughts about Liam, about Rachel, and about his own decisions kept him from sleeping. He felt as if he were balancing on the edge between the past and the present, trying to find a place where the future would fit. The clinic greeted him with the same sterile smell and white walls, but this time the excitement was noticeably stronger. The nurse smiled at him when he entered, although her friendly tone seemed out of place. Good morning, Mr. Carter. How are you feeling? She asked, leading him down the hallway. I'm fine, he replied, although inside everything was tightening from the tension. He was led into a small room with a soft couch and medical equipment. A young doctor with a confident demeanor entered behind, explaining the process. Adam listened, but the words seemed to fly by. The only thing he truly realized was that his actions today would determine someone else's life. When the nurse inserted the needle, the pain was sharp but bearable. Adam lay, staring at the ceiling, feeling his blood leave his body to give someone else a chance. The thought of Liam, his bright green eyes and shy smile, helped him cope with each minute of discomfort. You are doing a wonderful thing, Mr. Carter, the nurse said, noticing his tension. He did not respond. Those words, though, said sincerely, did not bring relief. After the procedure, Adam was transferred to a recovery room. He felt tired, as if his body had been drained of all energy. The doctor said it was a normal reaction and that he should rest for a few days. Sitting on the hospital bed, he thought only of one thing. Had it been enough? Would it help Liam? His fingers instinctively touched the phone on the bedside table. He didn't want to write to Rachel, but he knew she was waiting for news. Typing a short message, he sent it. I did it. I hope it helps. The response came almost instantly. Thank you, Adam. You have no idea how much this means to us. He did not respond. He closed his eyes, trying to distract himself from the weight of her words. The next day, Adam received a message from the clinic. The procedure had been successful, and the transplant had been administered to Liam. He looked at the screen for a long time before finally dialing Rachel's number. She answered almost immediately. Adam, her voice was soft, excited. Thank you. The doctors say everything went well? Liam is okay. That's good, he replied briefly. There was a pause on the other end. He asked about you, she added. Would you like to see him when he's ready? Adam thought about it. He felt that this boy had become a part of his life, but he didn't know if he wanted to delve even deeper into this world that left such deep scars. I'll think about it, he finally said, and hung up. The days passed slowly. Adam tried to return to work, but thoughts of Liam haunted him. When he finally decided to visit the boy, it felt more like an inner necessity than a decision. When he arrived at the hospital, Rachel met him at the entrance. She looked exhausted but grateful. He's in the ward, she said, leading him down the hallway. Liam lay in bed, hooked up to several machines, but when he saw Adam, his face lit up with a wide smile. Adam, you came, he said with a weak but joyful voice. Of course I came, Adam replied, approaching closer. How are you, buddy? I'm strong, like an astronaut, Liam said proudly, showing a hand gesture imitating a rocket's flight. Adam laughed, but this laughter was filled with something more than just joy. He looked at the boy and felt that his actions really mattered. Rachel stepped away to the door, leaving them alone. Adam sat on a chair next to the bed, looking at Liam. You know, Liam, he said, you're braver than most adults I know. The boy smiled and then softly asked, will you come to see me again? Adam froze, but he saw hope in his eyes that he couldn't shatter. Yes, he said softly. I'll come. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had made the right choice. Several months had passed since the transplant, and life slowly began to return to normal. Liam was recovering, slowly but surely. Adam continued to keep in touch, although he carefully limited his interactions with Rachel. He did it for the boy, who, despite all the circumstances, had become an important part of his life. One morning, when Adam was preparing for another workday, he found a letter in his mailbox. The handwriting was familiar. It was Rachel's. He immediately felt his whole body tense. Returning to the kitchen, he opened the envelope. Inside was a short note. Adam, I understand that you have no reason to forgive me, but I want you to know. I am grateful to you not only for helping Liam, but also for reminding me what kind of person I could be. You gave Liam a chance that I myself could not give him. Thank you for everything, Rachel. Adam set the letter aside. He felt neither anger nor relief, only a strange feeling of emptiness mixed with completion. A few days later, Adam drove to Rachel and Liam's place. He rarely visited them, but that day he felt he needed to see the boy. When he arrived, Liam ran out of the house, waving to him. His hair had started to grow back, and his skin looked healthier. It was a true symbol of hope. Adam! The boy shouted, running towards him. Adam picked him up, lifting him into the air. You look like you could conquer the world, buddy, he said with a smile. Of course. Now I'm strong like you, Liam proudly declared. Rachel came out onto the porch, quietly watching them. Her gaze was soft but silent. She no longer tried to talk to Adam about the past. It had become an unspoken agreement. Their interaction should revolve only around Liam. On the way home, Adam felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. It was a feeling of lightness. The past no longer held him captive. Rachel, her mistakes, and the pain she had brought no longer had power over him. Now all that mattered was what he had done for Liam. That evening, he sat on the porch of his house watching the sunset. Images floated in his head. Liam, his smile, and the words the boy had said that day. Now I'm strong, like you. Those words struck him. He didn't feel strong. He was a broken, embittered, and closed-off person. But maybe strength lay in overcoming all of that for someone else. Years later, Liam went to college. Adam attended his high school graduation, sitting in the back row to avoid attention. They maintained contact, although their relationship was more friendly than familial. Rachel no longer asked for forgiveness, and Adam no longer expected her justifications. The past remained in the past. The only thing he took from that story was the understanding that sometimes even the most painful decisions can be the beginning of something new. Looking at Liam, who was now a strong, confident young man, Adam felt that his sacrifices had not been in vain, and that was enough to keep living.